God. If you'd keep in mind that Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead in plain view of hundreds of people, and many of those people still chose not to believe. On the hillside of Galilee, when he broke the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, he was in the presence of thousands of people, yet many of those chose not to believe. What we have to keep in mind when we look at archaeology and the Bible is the blinding power of our sin nature. And this nature is so powerful that it makes the obvious the obscure at times. And as Pastor has alluded to earlier, the battle for truth is not necessarily an intellectual one, but rather a spiritual one. So what I want to do is in about 5 minutes highlight some of the startling discoveries that have been made over the last 150 years. And as a believer, it should, like Chris Matthews said, send cold chills up your leg. Now, I'll go in chronological order. The big one is the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I have down here a book that I picked up in Colorado Springs a couple of weeks ago, written by K.A. Kitchens of the University of Liverpool. And it's a great, big, thick book. I'll have it with me after the service if you'd like to borrow it. I have a small fee, $100 a day. No, I'm kidding. But it's a very large book that catalogs all the archaeological finds that support the Old Testament record. If you have a pen or something, if you just want to copy these down so that you can do some research on your own, the first one is the Hittite civilization. For years, the only place that you could find a reference to the Hittites was in the Bible. In fact, the Hittites were mentioned over 50 times. And scholars would use through the years that the reference to the Hittites in the Bible to point to the fact that it was just a book of myth and legend. Until in the late 19th century, German archaeologists uncovered the remains of the capital city of Hattusa in northern Turkey. Later on, when they were in Egypt digging, they found the great temple of Karnak, and on that was a treaty inscribed in silver which detailed the alliance between the Egyptians and the Hittites. But as Gleason Archer, who was perhaps the most brilliant Old Testament scholar of the 20th century, has said, the most startling discovery of the Hittites, though, was the Hittite legal code, in which it illuminated the type of transaction that Abraham made with the Hittites in Genesis chapter 23. If you're familiar with the story, you know that the Hittites wanted to give Abraham the entire tract of land. Abraham refused, because as the Hittite legal code later pointed out, that had Abraham purchased the entire tract of land rather than just the cave that he buried his deceased wife in, then he would have had to enter into some religious rituals which would have required him to sacrifice to false gods, something that Abraham could not do. So there we have the Hittites. Secondly, though, is the Amarna letters. You spell that A-M-A-R-N-A, Amarna. These were clay tablets found in 1887. And what these tablets are is a box of correspondence between the Egyptian pharaoh Amenhotep IV and some Canaanite rulers. Now, it's amazing. There's one letter in particular that is written by someone in Megiddo who mentions the fact that 5 cities had already fallen in the south, and these would have been the cities that Israel invaded in Numbers chapter 21, verses 1 through 3. The writer also mentions that the cities of Gezer, Ashkelon, and Lachish were also conquered. Now, when you couple the fact that there were no letters from Jericho or some of the other cities that were conquered early on, gives us reason to believe that we are reading in these Amarna letters nothing more than a historical confirmation of the events of the book of Joshua. By the way, Pharaoh didn't help. He'd already been there and done that and had the t-shirt. He'd already tangled with these people called the Hebiru, which the Mari tablets have concluded were nothing more than the Hebrews. Let's move on. The Dream Stela of Thutmose IV. Now, how many of you seen the movie The Ten Commandments? You seen those movies? You seen that kids movie that came out about 10 years ago, The Prince of Egypt? You know, one of the references in there was that Ramses was the Pharaoh of the Exodus. Now, the Pharaoh of the Exodus was not Ramses. That is a liberal position. Although I'll be honest with you, when I get to heaven and meet Moses, if he doesn't look like Charlton Heston, then I'm going to be disappointed. You know that? I really will. But the Pharaoh of the Exodus was Amenhotep II. His successor was Thutmose IV. And right there, in probably the most visible image of antiquity, the great Sphinx of Egypt, he chronicles his unexpected succession to the throne. And many scholars believe that what we have here written on this stela is the fact that the rightful heir to the throne, his older brother, died in the 10th plague of Egypt. So if you'll type that into your search engine and do some research or would like to use my books, you can see that right here in one of the most visible, memorable images of ancient past, we have a historical confirmation of the 10th plague of Egypt when God killed the firstborn of the land. Last of all is perhaps the greatest, and this is the most recent. Between 1964 and 1976, 44 miles south of Aleppo, Syria, 20,000 clay tablets were discovered. These became known as the Ebla tablets. and they were an archaeologist's dream. Professors Giovanni Pettinato and Paolo Mattei, they were the diggers from the University of Rome who supervised its excavation. He wrote 2 books about it, both books which are very difficult to obtain. But these tablets were from the ancient city of Ebla and were dated to around 2300 BC. Now, what is so significant about these tablets is that for years in seminaries and in colleges, we were taught that Moses could not have written the first 5 books of the Bible called the Pentateuch because writing had not been developed by the time of Moses. We also were told that the legal customs and the degree of civilization that is described in the Pentateuch was not developed by that time. Now we have 20,000 pieces of evidence to demonstrate that they were wrong and that the Bible was right. Writing did occur before Moses. In fact, it occurred even before Abraham. And so we have historical evidence here, but it gets better. In these Ebla tablets, we have names mentioned such as Adam, Eve, Abraham, Michael. Now, not that the people referred to in the Bible are specifically referred to here, but what we have is the fact that these names were in circulation at the time. This is amazing. They also mention the 5 cities of the plain, Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar. For years, scholars would say, where's the evidence that these cities existed? Well, in a mound in Syria, we have that evidence. Not only that, but those 5 cities are not only mentioned, but they're mentioned in the exact same order as the Old Testament. And critics had used that to say that the story of Abraham's victory in Genesis 14 over Kedorlaomer was fictitious. Now we know that it was not. There also was a reference to a priest king ruling at Salem. And many believe that this is a possible mention of Melchizedek in Genesis 14, or a descendant or a predecessor of Melchizedek. There's a poem there in which a place called Dilmun is referenced. Now keep in mind at the time these tablets were written, they're about 1,700 years removed from creation, if we trust Ussher's chronology, that the creation of man took place in about 4004 BC. So they're only about 1,700 years removed from creation. Now let's compare that with us. It'd be like the events of the Roman Empire, which we've all studied in school, and we know great details about the Roman Empire. So here they have 1,700 years into human history, and there's a poem there describing Eden much like it is described in the Bible. There's also, on the creation tablet, there's a poem written to the Creator, and it reads, Lord of heaven and earth, the earth was not, you created it. The light of day was not, you created it. The morning light you had not yet made to exist. Now, keep in mind that what we have presented this morning is corroborative evidence. It's not a slam dunk proof of the Bible. I'm giving you evidence, though, to prove that the places, things, events recorded in the Bible were indeed history, and they can be backed up. There are other ones. There's the Cyrus Cylinder, the Nabonidus Chronicle, wherein we find the identity of Belshazzar, whom critics had used to doubt the Bible. The House of David inscription has recently been uncovered. There are the tablets of Ras Shamra, the Mari tablets, the Nuzi tablets, and recently the discovery of the sarcophagus of Herod, as is told about in the New Testament. So suffice it to say, I would say that you're pretty safe to go home tonight and tell your sons and daughters the story of Jonah and the whale, the story of Noah and the flood, and especially the story of when Jesus died on the cross, was buried, and rose again. Because if we can't trust the Bible when it talks about the names, places, and events in Genesis, how can we trust it when Jesus said that I am the way, the truth, and the life? But we can trust it because the Bible is indeed the Word of God. And so you can believe it, you can teach your kids to believe it, and in believing its message, then you can have a relationship with God Himself, which will bless you in this life and in eternity. Pastor.
Hey, give him a hand. That's powerful, wasn't it? Excellent. Thanks, Pastor Steve. That was good. I'm blown away by those Marna letters. That's incredible. Hey, let's go on. Number 10, real quickly here. It's survival against attacks. In other words, preservation. The Bible's been preserved. No book attacked like the Bible. Banned, burned, all that. The agnostic Voltaire said within 100 years the Bible will be forgotten. But it's very unique that in the very place he said that, in his home that he lived in with its printing press, was later purchased by the American Bible Society 50 years later, and they produced Bibles out of Voltaire's home. Thomas Paine said he had all but destroyed the Bible. He was wrong. And again, I say to you, attacking the Bible is like beating on a rock with your hand. You come out the loser.